So thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Willard Watson. I'm the Programs and Outreach Director at the Blowing Rock Art and History Museum. And it's my privilege to welcome y'all this evening to our program that we're calling Pivot Step. It's a conversation with choreographers around the intersection of dance arts and social justice. So this panel is going to be moderated and led by Kara Hagen-Gelbler, who's also dance faculty at Appalachian State University and the director of Small and Mighty Acts. So this program was put together as a way to expand upon our current exhibition offering, Small and Mighty Acts, Altar for Black Lives. So I've got my screen sharing right now to take you to the Altar's website. So the Altar of Black Lives was constructed on King Street in Boone last summer in response to the murder of George Floyd, and it became a place for the community to collectively grieve and grapple with the violence against Black lives committed in America. So as you can see on the screen, there are some images of the altar on site. The community really rallied together and contributed works of art and writing to make this sacred space. And so after it was removed from King Street in downtown Boone, it came to Blowing Rock Art and History Museum, where we photographed every piece that was part of the altar and have reconstructed it in our Alexander Community Gallery to serve as an exhibition. So we added some framing information to give context around the role that altars serve throughout time and across cultures, and to also give framing information about what Black Lives Matter really is and what Small and Mighty Acts is as an organization. So we've hosted this in our community gallery since November, and it will be up until March 27th. We have images here on the website, but it's really powerful to visit in person. If you're able to, we really encourage you to. And we will be releasing a catalog to go along with the exhibit with some writings that expand upon the themes represented in the altar, and also with images of all the pieces that were part of the altar. We have done a month of programs associated with this exhibition, including conversations around poems from Fatima Ashgar's work, If They Come For Us, a collection of songs from the Civil Rights Movement called Songs of Freedom. We also Kara hosted a 2-week-long writing workshop around writing on themes related to Black Lives Matter, which has led to contributions for our upcoming booklet to go along with the Small and Mighty Acts exhibit. So the conversations around If They Should Come For Us and the Songs for Freedom are both available on recordings at the Blowing Rock Art and History Museum YouTube page, just like this conversation will be offered as a recording on the Blowing Rock Art and History Museum YouTube page. So if you have to leave early, or if you want to be able to share this information with people you care about, please, I welcome you to subscribe to our YouTube page and continue to get information there. So normally I go through and I introduce our speakers this evening, but the people that we have that are talking to us are just like incredible artists, and I don't feel like I could do them justice. So Kara is going to take the helm here. So if y'all could please join me in welcoming our roundtable this evening of Kara Hagen-Gelbler, Julie Johnson, and Tamara Williams Xavier.
Thank you, Willard. And I have the great pleasure of introducing these amazing artists, educators, scholars, movers and shakers in the world. Both of these people are people I care about very much, and I care about their work very much. And I'm excited to have them share some of their work and some of their commentary. I'll introduce Dr. Julie Johnson first. She is a dance artist and educator working at the intersections of creative practice and research, African diaspora movement aesthetics, community interaction, and social justice to discover the ways that dance can serve as a practice of inquiry, empathy, and empowerment. She is executive director of Moving Our Stories, LLC, using participatory dance, memory mapping, and interactive site-specific performance to amplify Black women and the communities, histories, and experiences that shape the world around us as a strategy towards building collective empathy, empowerment, and most importantly, joy for all. She serves on the faculty at Spelman College in the Department of Dance, Performance, and Choreography, as well as the African Diaspora and the World program. She curates the dance department's lecture series, bringing audiences and artists together to dissect unique creative practices, scholarship, and leading strategies in the field of dance. She's also a co-founding editor of the Dancer Citizen, an online open access peer-reviewed dance journal exploring the work of socially engaged artists. Dr. Johnson earned her PhD in dance at Temple University's Boyer College of Music and Dance, researching meanings and experiences of community in a West African dance class in Philadelphia. So thank you for being here with us this evening. And now I'll introduce Tamara Williams. Professor Tamara Williams earned her BFA in dance from Florida State University and received her MFA in dance from Hollins University in collaboration with the American Dance Festival, Forsyth Company, and Frankfurt University. She's a certified gyrotonic trainer, Reiki practitioner, and capoeirista. Williams' performing career includes work with the Alpha Omega Theatrical Dance Company, David P. France Dance Company, Errol Grimes Dance Group, Millicent and Company, Angelus Pulse, Maverick Dance Experience, and Urban Bushwomen's Apprentice Company. Her company has been performed nationally and internationally, including Serbia, Switzerland, Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, Mexico, and Brazil. In 2011, Williams created Moving Spirits, Inc., a contemporary arts organization dedicated to performing, researching, documenting, cultivating, and producing arts of the African diaspora. Williams was trained intensely in Salvador de Bahia, Brazil, in Silvestri technique and African Brazilian dance. She is a 2012 recipient of the Artist Residency Fellowship and the Dance and Performance Institute in Trinidad, a 2013 recipient of the Harlem Stage Aaron Davis Hall Fund for New Work Grant, and a 2014 and 2015 Community Arts Fund grantee by the Brooklyn Arts Council. In 2015, Moving Spirits, Inc. was accepted as company in residence at the Jamaica Center for Arts and Leadership in Jamaica, Queens. Williams was a 2015 Turkey Land Grove Foundation recipient, in which she participated in a 7-day dance writing residency in Martha's Vineyard, and a 2015 Fall Space Grant recipient awarded by the Brooklyn Arts Exchange. She is a recipient of the Digital Making Grant from UNC Charlotte's College of Arts and Architecture and several Mini Diversity and Chancellor Diversity Challenge Fund grants from the UNC Charlotte's Diversity Fund. She has received 2 faculty research grants to further her studies of African American ring shout traditions in the Carolinas, Low Country, and West Africa. Williams has received several culture block grants from Mecklenburg County's Arts and Science Council to offer free African diaspora dance and music programming for communities around Charlotte. In 2020, Williams was awarded the College of Arts and Architecture 2020 Board of Governors Teaching Award. Williams' research has been published in the Dancer Citizen Journal and has a forthcoming book, Giving Life to Movement, analyzing African Brazilian dance histories and cultures. Her monograph, The African Diaspora and Civic Responsibility, Addressing Social Justice Through the Arts, Education, and Community Engagement, is currently under contract with Lexington Books. This latter text investigates how African American, African Brazilian, Haitian, and Latinx artists and scholars address civic responsibility and social justice issues through the arts. Williams's research on African American ring shout traditions has been disseminated at several colleges and universities in the United States and Brazil. Her article, Reviving Culture Through Ring Shout, was published in the scholarly journal, The Dancer Citizen. Williams has researched and developed various community programs focusing on marginalized people in New York City and Charlotte. The programs provide opportunities for underserved communities to learn and practice dances of the African diaspora, histories and cultures which are strategically neglected in US education systems. I welcome you, Dr. Johnson and Professor Williams. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'm so looking to sharing your work. So before we begin, before we share the work, I wanted to ask you a question. So I consider movement to exist in 3 realms. Movement that is expressive movement of the body, like dance or sport or anything else that you might do as a form of expression, movement across borders, either for travel or for refuge, and movement as it relates to struggle and coalition building. And as dancers, we find ourselves playing in all of those realms. And so how do you, as dancer scholars, dancer educators, artists in the world, find yourself working in these three spaces of movement in ways that advance social justice?
Oh, yes. Well, thank you for having me. I guess I'll start, Julie, if you don't mind. A lot of my work, and I think this is for me personally, is really focused on movement for reform, not necessarily because I want it to be, but because it has to be in order for me to survive in society and keep my sanity. Yeah, and so it's a means of expression through movement, but it's also, like in the 1960s and 70s, a movement to call attention to the injustices that are happening. Yeah, and so I've I've worked with several artists in New York City and actually across the United States in creating things such as Dancing for Justice, in which we use our body. Yeah, the Black body to me is already politicized. So we use our bodies as a means and a way to stand up for injustices. We use them as a way to call out using our voice and our body for attention. And we've now, yeah, it's the first time we did Dancing for Justice. There was nothing written about it. It wasn't publicized, right, in such a way that now people are talking about. Yeah, and so sometimes it takes a little bit of time for the momentum of the movement to actually catch up to others who are surrounding. Yeah, so for me, the movement as a call, the movement in all aspects of movement for me is always a call. It's a call to action. It's a call for attention. It's a call for we need something to be done. It's not just movement for movement's sake. It's movement for the sake of people's lives. Yeah, because at one point in time I was thinking, what does it matter if I'm dancing on stage if my cousin or my brother or myself can be killed tonight just for being Black, right? So dance for me really has to tell a narrative, either if it's my narrative or the narrative of my ancestors or those who don't have a voice. I like to use my dance as a way of speaking in ways that maybe some don't have the access or ability to do, if that makes sense. Okay, I'll cut it short because I could keep going on and on and on.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for this question, and thank you for having me. It's so great to be here, and I love that answer, Tamara. So I'm just gonna uh, echo that and build on it a little bit. That I think for me, it's the joy of being able to always center the body, um, and starting um, with the body, the self, um, to understand how, understand ourselves more deeply, and our relationship to others around us, and to how we operate in the world. Um, and so it's this idea that we start with our bodies, and change can happen here first and then ripple out to our communities, and to society in a broader way. Um, and I'm gonna bungle this quote, but it's something I always bring up by Paloma McGregor in an article that she wrote surveying dance and civic engagement. I think it was like from 2011, but it just stuck with me. And it was something about how, and we can start with an idea that can become a practice and become a way of being, through movement, through dance. And I like to also reverse that and think about us as artists and our ways of being, and how, we don't always have to start with the words. We can start with the embodiment and the things that we don't have words for, and make discoveries there. Um, and uh, um, and so yeah, so I think centering that feels full of so much potential for change making, for understanding, for building empathy, for researching, and for deeper understanding. And with the work that I've been doing, I'm very much interested in history and looking to the past to better understand what's happening in our present in order to build the future that we want for ourselves. And I am really honored that I get to do that through my creative process, through research, through moving, through writing, and through working with students at Spelman. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And so without further ado, I'd love to share some of the work of these artists. So we have 2 short dance films. We'll start with Dr. Johnson's film, and then we'll show Professor Williams' film, and then we'll have a little chat about those.
Amen. I go. Amen. I go. Amen.
Okay.
Thank you for that. And so I'd love to ask each of you, I'll start with you, Julie. Tell us what we were seeing in that film and give us some context of the project that brought that film into being.
Sure, thanks. So the piece is called Visitation. It is part of a collaborative dance and multimedia endeavor called Idle Crimes and Heavy Work, which explores the history of incarceration and incarcerated labor in Georgia, specifically through the lens of Black women. And so a lot of the times when, conversations happen around incarceration, they're centered on men, and so this is looking specifically at the histories, lived experiences, embodied knowledge of Black women. And this work actually grew out of a larger project called the Georgia Incarceration Performance Project, which was a collaboration between Spelman College and the University of Georgia, looking at that same history. And so Idle Crimes and Heavy Work, again, is specifically focused on Black women's experiences of racial and gendered violence, and resistance and restoration. We focus on the time period of Reconstruction and the progressive era, after the abolishment of slavery, where laws and policies and social structures emerged to criminalize Black bodies, to continue to extract value from those bodies through incarcerated labor. And so we're doing that through this video installation, looking at all of this through the video installation, through live interactive performance, site-specific performance, workshops, and archival research, as well as embodied memory mapping, and community gatherings and actions. And so it all kind of actually works holistically. So I'm always really interested to see what people think, just looking at a piece of it, just the video. In this video, we staged this, much like our performance series, as a prison visit, right? So a visit that we might think of, if we're thinking about kind of the stereotypical prison visit in a movie or on TV, with the rows of chairs, pane glass, pick up a phone. The rows of chairs facing each other, one row is occupied by the performers, the other row is empty, and audience is invited to sit in a chair across from a performer, and that action prompts the performer to share an embodied story about this history. And so it's a way to invite people to get close to the work, to get close to the history, um, uh, to get close to the stories that are so often either overlooked or skewed or kept far away from us in the archives, if they're even in, represented in the archives at all. We chose this site, Grant Park, for its connection to the legacy of slavery. It was, much of it was graded, and mounds were built during the Civil War by enslaved folks to protect the city of Atlanta during the war. And because of its namesake, who was a civil engineer, who played a significant role in bringing the railroad to Atlanta and to the South, and the railroad perpetuated convict leasing across the country. Also chose that site for its proximity to the Atlanta Stockade, which has its whole own history around incarceration and incarcerated labor in the Grant Park area. And so we drew heavily from the story of Maddie Crawford, who at the age of 16 was incarcerated for killing her abusive stepfather. And she was sentenced to life in prison. This was 1896, I believe. And she eventually became a blacksmith, and we know her story because she was featured in a newspaper in like 1903 with a headline that read, "The only woman blacksmith in America is a convict." So she used her strength and her skill and her intelligence and her fortitude to survive amidst the atrocities of prison labor camps in Georgia. And so this work is not to just put on her story. We actually try not to do that, but it's a way to find embodied connections so that we can turn towards her experience and invite audience to do the same. So I think I could keep going on and on, but that's the basic of the context.
Thank you so much. And what an incredible story. I actually didn't know that. And I've seen the film a couple of times, but now that I do know that, it gives it so much more context and depth, as if it wasn't already depthy enough, right? And so I thank you for that, and definitely will be looking into that more myself. What an amazing, amazing thing. Thank you. And so similarly, Tamara, tell us a little bit about your film, and that obviously there's some information that you give about Ring Shout in the film itself, but in your own words, if you could contextualize it a bit more for us.
Sure, absolutely. So the beginning of this film, it has some information also about the music and the cinematography, which is important. So Marlon Morrison was the brilliant mind behind the cinematography. Luciano Xavier, who's also my husband, helped with some of the music composition, and the wonderful voice that you heard singing was Charity Williams, which is a student, and all of the dancers in the film were my students here at UNC Charlotte. So the Ring Shout is a practice. It's a tradition that was brought here to the United States by enslaved people from Africa. So mainly thinking about the Yoruba people, the Akan people, the Fan, Iwe, and the Angola nations that were brought here from West and Central Africa. They were not only brought to the United States, but parts of the Caribbean and Brazil as well, just in different regions. And so here in the United States, most of the people, especially from the Yoruba nation, were brought to the areas of Charleston and Sullivan Island. Yeah, there's a huge plaque if you actually go there, and it says the majority of people that were brought to the United States during this time were brought to this point, and it's the only thing there, and the only way you would know that was a place that was a slave port bringing people in during the 17 and 1800s. So the Ring Shout is a form that really embraced community. I call it a movement of resistance, especially because during the 17 all the way up until parts of the early 1900s, there were laws in place. There were Jim Crow laws. There were also other laws because of, let's say, the Stono Rebellion and the Haitian Revolution. And then you have I'm talking about all these things that happened in history. You also have the Protestant movement that happened during the 1800s that really forced the enslaved community to really tried to cut ties with their African lineage and heritage, especially during the late 17 and into the early 1800s. Yeah. So ring shout, because it was brought to the United States in one form, really embracing all of these different African nations together, with the impact of Christianity and Judeo-Christian practices in the South, especially. The ring shout started to shift a little bit, and the drum became illegal. Singing and moving the body in certain ways were also frowned upon, and people were actually losing their lives for practicing these Africanistic forms. And so what people decided to do in these communities were embrace embrace some of these practices of assimilation, but within the ring shout, they continued with the rhythms of the drum in the body. Yeah, so you have things like ham bone, the shuffling of the feet, all of these different patterns, and even in the song, being this place of resistance and keeping and holding on to culture. So my ring shout research goes way back many, many years. But I do a lot of my research in Charleston, in the Low Country, in Savannah, Georgia, in Beaufort. I go there. I talk to my grandmother. I talk to my elders. Yeah, it's really important to have conversations with them as well. And so I imagine and reimagine what ring shout looked like in the late 1700s and 1800s. Yeah, and so I go through a lot of drawings. I go through narratives that are written by physicians and a lot of missionaries, and I reconstruct what the movement looked like then. Yeah, and so because of the pandemic, we decided to do a dance film in honor of the Black communities here in Charlotte, Mecklenburg County, and really thinking of this as a means of archiving and preserving not only the stories of the people that were here, but also of the students. So the students in the piece, you see they're dancing ring shout at some points in the circle, in the circle that goes counterclockwise, which represents in the ring shout practice going towards the past, honoring ancestors. So ring shout is an ancestral dance. Yeah, but also I asked the students to research a matriarch in their family and to create a dance based on their life. And so all of the students, you see them dancing some contemporary movement. It's movement that they all created in honoring someone from their family line from either the early 1900s up until 1920s. And so it's part of preserving their narratives as well. So this film was created in 3 distinct locations. The Salome School, which was a series of schoolhouses built here in Mecklenburg County during the 1920s for Black communities, a place in which ring shout would have occurred because school and places of worship were oftentimes tied together. You also see a Stafford Cabin, which is the only still standing cabin for enslaved people that's here in this region that I know of. It was actually built in 1760 by the enslaved people here in Mecklenburg County, and people lived in it up until 1849, which is on record from the Stafford family. And then the other aspect of the film that you see is the Catawba River, which is a huge part of African American and West and Central Africa culture. It's a lot of cultures, but thinking of this idea of cleansing, of washing, rejuvenating the spirit, mind, and body. And so all 3 of those things are intertwined within this piece, and you see the cabin and the water and the schoolhouse throughout this film. And from making of this film, there's been a lot more attention, let's say, for the Salome School here. So they're moving it now because it's actually in the middle of an apartment complex they built around it. Yeah, so now they're moving it to the Charlotte Museum of History, and then they're also going to do some preserving of the Stafford Cabin as well.
Wow, that is all amazing. That's really great to hear about the moving of the school out of the apartment complex into a place where it can be better taken care of. And I also really resonate with the um, asking of your students to inquire with their elders and to create something based on that. I think that's so important. And so for both of you, how have having these projects on film helped to get more visibility for not just these projects themselves, but the themes that these projects are bringing to light, especially during these pandemic times when we can't see each other and we can't be together in space? What have you found have been the most positive pieces of feedback that you've received from these films? Where have they gone, and what impact do you see that they're having?
Well, for me, I think it's still a story unfolding, but it was we created this in June 2019. It was such an honor to have it included in ADF's Movies by Movers uh, Screen Dance Festival this past summer. It got tremendous feedback, and I was still, I think at that time, figuring out the language around it, and that's where I am. Um, I like to say that I'm a slow processor, and I say that, fully embracing it with love. Things happen in the body, and we create work, and then I'm figuring out how to articulate. And it's that process of sending the work out into the world and getting that feedback and all of that really helps me figuring out, think about the language around it. And it's super interesting because it made its way a couple other places, and in a couple other contexts, where I think there was a feeling of, oh, we have to create a context for this that maybe didn't exist. Like some of the presenters felt that pressure to give that context to the audience, where I really like to let the audience have their experience and share what that is. So it's been interesting to see that unfold. And also, like I said, this is really meant to be in concert with all of the other pieces of the Idle Crimes and Heavy Work collaboration. So I'm still figuring out, there's a lot more in store about where the performance goes from here in a pandemic world, and how what the next iteration of the film is going to be with that. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Julie. So this piece, Remembrance, it has been shared at a couple museums, right? So the Charlotte Museum, we had a lunch, what is it called? Lunch and Talk or Lunch and Learn or something like that was the name of it. And it's really been a point of, it's really been a piece to call attention. Yeah, like this call to action and understanding of Black culture, but not just of Black culture, but American culture. Yeah, and so um, usually when the film is shown at the museum, it was also shown at the North Carolina Museum of History. There was also a TV show I was on, which was it was exciting, but a little nerve-wracking because it was a completely different kind of context. Yeah. Um, but usually when the film is shown and is shown at a lot of universities and schools right now, I do a lecture demo. Yeah, and I invite people to get into their bodies and move, right? From the experience of ring shout, not just saying that ring shout is this Black dance form. No, in saying that ring shout is a dance form that can be embodied by all, and it helps us to learn about Black culture and history and tradition and all of these things, to have a deeper and better understanding of where many movement forms and music forms spring from in the United States, like vintage jazz, and you have blues, and you have rock and roll and all of these things and tap, right? And the seeds come from this movement of ring shout. So the film has really been kind of like a conversation starter to then get people engaged to then go deeper into the work of what ring shout is in the history and all of these great things that it represents.
Yes, yeah. And having been privy to one of those lecture demonstration / classes, Tamara actually came to App before the pandemic to do a master class, and it was wonderful. And our students learned so much. And so one thing that I'm always wondering, because I see so much dance film every year. I mean, I see hundreds of pieces every year. And one thing I'm always wondering about is kind of the divide between work that is considered neutral. And by that, I mean white work, right? In the world of filmmaking and especially mass media, neutrality is attributed to white bodies, and bodies of color and other marginalized folks never get to show up in the filmic space as neutral parties. And so I'm wondering how in your work, obviously in the work that you're presenting, you're not trying to present those bodies as neutral because you have something to say, but at the same time, how are you through this filmic work challenging or butting up against this idea that there's only one way to be mainstream or to be in a space where people feel like it's accessible to them? And by accessible, I mean accessible to the status quo, right? How are we pushing up against that through this work?
That's a great question, and I think it's something I'm probably still navigating, to be honest. Because I also, as a Black choreographer, artist, scholar, a lot of times you get into, okay, this is dance and then this is the Black dance, right? And this is especially when we go into then historical dances and things of that nature, right? So all of a sudden now we know ring shout is here, and now it's like this Black dance, and we call upon it when it's Black History Month. And that's where I want to get out of, right? This should be a part of all of our core curriculum, honestly, right? And so I think really me being very persistent and saying that, okay, no, this is American history, this is American history, this is American history, right? In every space that I go into, when I start talking and going into lectures, and then a lot of people ask me too, they're like, I'm really interested in ring shout, but I'm in this white body. How can I? And so there's already, because society puts us in a certain kind of mindset that there's this and that's theirs, and so I'm not saying that it's good to appropriate or take from anyone's culture at all, but if you're learning about someone's culture, I think it's totally fine to dive in, especially if you're learning from someone that has really been a part of the culture. It's their culture, they're teaching and sharing. And so I think that having these divisions and labels, we have to try to sometimes, and which is hard, especially in the academy, to we as not part of the system have to sometimes find ways to come together and make sure that these divisions don't really divide us in the ways that it's created to be. Yeah, and so I think when we say things like, okay, it's American history, period, and no explanation is needed, right? And so we can come together knowing that. And so I think, yeah, I think I'll just leave it at that. And I think that's kind of where I'm going with a lot of my work nowadays, and not just ring shout, but all of the many things that I teach.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to add to that. The three of us, Karen and Tamara, we've had the chance to work together and talk previously, and one of our last chats was with Ananya Chatterjee, and I remember her asking, like, how do we, what's the invitation you know, what is the invitation to participate in each other's sense of beauty, in each other's culture, to build solidarity. And I think both of you do that amazingly well. I think Tamara's work and this film, you know, is that invitation. And I think that's also what I'm you know, part of what I'm trying to do with Idle Crimes and Heavy Work, with that empty row of chairs symbolizing like the invitation to get close to this, and to be uncomfortable with it. I think some of the feedback that I've gotten, you know, back to the previous question, has been really positive, but also, you know, it's that I still want to make space to reckon with the painful past, where so many folks are doing amazing, beautiful work, and moving forward to the future and to joy. I'm like, we as a country haven't fully dealt with this yet, and so got to get to this to get to there. And so that's the invitation, that there's space for all of it, that it's a both and, right? And I love our pieces connected, Tamara, in this way, because as you reminded me in one conversation, Ring Shout has so many movements of labor in it. And that's a big centerpiece of Idle Crimes and Heavy Work, is talking about that labor. So that is like, you know, the joy and the resistance of the Ring Shout, and you know, the amplification of the labor of Black women who helped to build the South and to build the country through this work. So I think I'm so appreciative of these conversations, and to be able to juxtapose this work.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you both for that. And you bring up such wonderful points about the both and the invitation, and the ways that we can continue to invite each other into our conversations, into our experiences, into our spaces as a path toward healing. I love that. I'd like to open it up now for a couple of questions from anybody who's on the Zoom with us. And yeah, does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns?
Hi, I don't have any questions that I can think of at the moment, but I thank you and appreciate y'all's work. They're very beautiful. And let's see, I guess I'd like to kind of just talk, if that's okay, just for a second. I really liked the, you know, visitation. I think I found it very interesting to see these women, and they're kind of contorting themselves a lot, but sometimes it's really big and expressive. So it's just like they're imprisoned, and they're dealing with these things on the inside, but also like being kind of molded into this small space due to their circumstances. And then you have folks just coming in, and they just come in for a moment, and they just sort of watch and leave. But either way, they are still in these spaces. So it's, I like that that you worded it as an invitation, because I think kind of an invitation to this empathy, to you sit down and you don't want to just walk away, but seeing what they're working with anyway. And then the next piece, Ring Shout. So it kind of invites you to join this dance. It's got this driving music, and they're all dancing together. And then you've got these magnificent, that fella with the hair, like, is really outstretched and beautiful. So I don't know. I see that as an invitation as well, to like join the circle. You know, you see empathy, join. So just thank you for your work. Lots to think about.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, Dr. Johnson, I was really struck in your work of the the eye contact and the kind of confrontation, especially, which in some ways gets explained by the kind of circumstance that's revealed of the visitor and of the audience member, coming to witness, I think you said a story, right, that unfolds of a piece of choreography. But I'm just curious to hear if you have thoughts of either what that's become or whether it originated somewhere else, of the import of that kind of witnessing and confronting on the part of the performer, really kind of to the camera, right? And that presentation of self. And there's so much emotion in those, in the gaze, really, and the strength of those performers inhabiting that gaze. I'd just love to hear your thoughts on that, or how that came about in the creation of the movement.
Thank you for that question. This film, like I said, was created in conjunction with our first interactive performance, which premiered at the Museum of Contemporary Art at Georgia in 2019. And so it was part of this exhibit, the live performance, and it was just a one-time performance. And so the film was meant to stay in the space, and it was an installation that would stay in the space. And so my collaborators and I talked about how we could invite the audience through the screen to really have a relationship with the performer and the embodied stories that were being shared. So that's where the eye contact came in from, and the close-ups, but also the super far away shot, to represent how the archives are kept away from us, how the incarcerated peoples are kept far away from us, and so many stories are kept away from us. So it's so that's where that came from. But I really have to shout out my collaborators, Kimberly Benz, who was our videographer, amazing documentarian videographer, who really did a lot of that great work, and Giwayan Mata, who's a community collaborator, and artistic director, Tamara Williams Harris, who is performing in the piece. And so, and all of the performers really created their own experience, after digging into the research with materials like photographs, texts, and documents, and then the embodied memory mapping, really kind of created their own movement experience. And every time with the live performance, for example, every time an audience member sits in the chair, it's a little bit different because it's based on that relationship that they're building with that audience member. And so you see some of that in the film. Tamara, for example, wanted to think about the theme of time. Like, what does life in prison look like for a 16-year-old? And so every time an audience member sat in her chair, she aged herself. She started as a teen to someone in 20s, to a middle-aged woman, to an elder. And through the tension in the muscles, use of internal space, or taking up more, like these subtle differences, really kind of shifted that story, and what I thought was pretty compelling ways. So I'm grateful for these collaborations. I hope this answers your question somewhat.
It beautifully shares more information about the work. Thank you so much. That idea of aging in the performance is really profound. That's very cool. Thank you.
Thanks. Anything else?
I just want to quickly shout out Alternate Roots in the Surdna Foundation, who's supporting my work through the Partners for Change grant. So thank you for giving me that space to do that. But yeah, this has been a joy to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. And before we go, of course, I want to say thank you to you both. Always in awe of the things that you create and you send out into the world, and always grateful to be in your presence, to be in your company. And I would love to know what's happening next for the both of you so folks can keep up with your work and what's happening.
What's happening? There's a lot happening. So I just had a book published. I think I'll start there. It's Giving Life to Movement, the Silvestri dance technique. You can get it on Amazon or from McFarland Publishing, Giving Life to Movement. And it's my journey through Silvestri dance technique. It's a technique that I teach that comes out of Salvador Bahia, Brazil, by Rosangela Silvestri, and it really has changed my life, my theory and my practice of movement and dance. So that's one. This year is the 10th year anniversary of my dance company, Moving Spirits. And so we're going to be doing, knock on wood, work here in Charlotte. I'm bringing some company members down from New York, and then we'll hopefully at the end of this year also go up to New York and have some performances there, outdoors. Yeah, and then I'm also very excited that I'm also working with Professor Hagen, yeah, on a new project as well, creating a new dance work with my dance company for the spring / summer. So I'm really excited about those things, but always, always, always diving deep, always writing, always researching. I'm going to Nigeria later on this year to continue finding these connections with the dances that were brought here to the United States and the Americas. So more and more and more. Thank you all for having me as well. This has been a wonderful evening. Yeah.
So my collaborators and I are working on the next iteration of site-specific performance and dance film that is going to center the perspectives of people impacted by incarceration who are going to be working with us through a virtual workshop series, and exchanging stories and creating movement together. And that movement will become the vocabulary for these site-specific performances, which will happen in areas in Atlanta connected to the history of Black women's incarcerated labor. So in ways that have kind of become invisibilized. So the idea is that the performance will kind of bring some light to that. And so I am working on that with collaborators and continuing teaching at Spelman. I want to shout out this Department of Dance, the Dance Performance and Choreography, and my amazing colleagues and students working towards our end of semester performance. Things are continuing with the Dancer Citizen, dancercitizen.org. And I am planning on some writing projects of, focusing on idle crimes and heavy work, and also the Georgia Incarceration Performance Project. And Tamara, I want to collaborate with you on some writing, right? We dropped the seed, so we got to see what we can do with that.
Get on it.
But yeah, so looking forward to that.
Amazing. Well, I thank you both, and we'll conclude our evening here. And I hope that all of you who are on the call and those of you who are watching this post recording will follow up and see what these wonderful artists are doing. I want to thank the Blowing Rock Art and History Museum for everything that you've done in terms of having us install the Altar for Black Lives and all the programming that's happening around that. And hopefully the reverberations of that will move out into the community in positive ways. So with that, I thank you all, and have a wonderful, wonderful evening.